send a message to those who try and divide us. You just go to hell. We are together. I can't tell you how thrilled I am to be here in Detroit, Michigan, to once again tell the world that the women in this country are reclaiming our time.
Reclaiming our time was a theme of this weekend's Women's March National Convention in Detroit. That is Congresswoman Maxine Waters, who delivered the fiery keynote address on Saturday to a room of more than 4,000 women and a few men as well. I was co-hosting that luncheon, the Sojourner Truth Luncheon, along with Michaela Angela Davis. What you just heard was just a warm-up. Here's more of Congresswoman Waters laying down the wood.
It is very fortuitous that we're gathered here this afternoon in Detroit as we continue to witness a record number of women who are boldly coming forward to reveal disturbing and grotesque acts of sexual harassment, assault, and rape, oftentimes at the hands of men who believed they were too rich and too powerful to ever be confronted or held accountable. Today we declare we're not taking it anymore. Keep your nasty comments away from us. Keep your tricks and your lies to yourself. And keep your hands off our backs and our bodies. Just take a look at who we now have in the White House. Donald Trump is the most dishonorable and despicable human being to ever serve in the office of the presidency. You saw him point to his Republican primary opponent, Carly Fiorina, and say, "Look at that face." Would anyone vote for that? Can you imagine that? The face of our next president? I was there also in Missouri at the third debate when he stalked Hillary Clinton and stood behind her, breathing down her back in an effort to intimidate her. Over the past 2 weeks, he's continued to attack my dear colleague and friend, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, calling her wacky. This is a president who has obstructed justice right before our eyes. Finally, this is a president who I believe did collude with the Russians to undermine our democracy. They are afraid of this president, and instead of standing up and accepting responsibility, they are sitting back because they're afraid that they won't be reelected. They should not be reelected. This is a president who told us before he was elected that he was going to lift the sanctions for Russia. This is a president who's not only colluded with Putin, but this is a president who understands not only what he is doing for Russia, but indeed what Tillerson is doing, who's supposed to be your Secretary of State. They are aligned because they want to lift the sanctions to drill for oil in the Arctic. It's all about money. Follow the dollar, and you'll understand what they're doing. And so, I understand that there may be some indictments coming in the next day or so. We don't know exactly who it is, but it ought to be Manafort. And it ought to be the others of them that are allied around oil and around support for Russia.
Of course, the convention followed the Women's March held in D.C. in January, which drew collectively, actually wasn't just in D.C., it was actually cities across the world, more than 5 million people, the largest mass demonstration on a single day in American history. One of the folks who was at the Women's March National Convention is Letitia James, the public advocate for the city of New York. Of course, she participated in several panels there. Of course, we'll be back with our panel, Malik Boyd, Long Victoria Burke, and Eugene Craig. Letitia, what's interesting is that you had some really tough conversations that were taking place at this convention between black women, between white women, on the whole issue of how do you deal with this when 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump?
First, let me just thank you, Roland, for having me here this morning. at the convention, which was exhilarating, there were some hard conversations about race and racism, which were basically at the heart of the women's movement. And there were conversations about why 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. And although most of the women who were present there, alleged that they did not vote for Donald Trump, there's no denying that, their family members and other allies and friends, some of their allies voted for Donald Trump. And the question is why. And so what we attempted to do is try to parse and try to understand and try to come together as one and recognize that we've got to build coalitions going forward if we're going to take back both the House and the Senate as well as the White House.
Well, and on that particular point, you also had to deal with legacy as well, because you've had the feminist movement that has not been kind to black women. And you still have this going on because you had a lot of black women who did not want to participate in the Women's March in January. There were some even who didn't even want to participate in this national convention. And so you've got some issues of trust here when it comes to women saying we're standing together, when with the feminist movement, you have not had that in American history.
There are a lot of conversations, one, about legacy. There are a lot of conversations about intersectionality. The notion that as a woman of color, as an African-American woman, that I need to be denied my identity. A lot of discussions about identity politics. And as I mentioned on one of the panels, there were some pundits who basically said that the reason why Hillary lost was because of identity politics. And I take issue with that statement, because it's difficult for me as an African-American woman to deny my experience as an African-American woman in politics and in society as a whole, and that you cannot separate my race from my gender, and that it's all part of one package. And in some areas and in some organizations that are controlled by women in the majority, white women, they just want to focus on issues. And that's important. That's very important. But at the same time, we've got to talk about issues and their impact, disproportionate impact on people of color. The policies in this country, the laws in this country, our standing in this country, and how we have been treated in this country. There was a wonderful article yesterday in the New York Times about James Madison, the founders of this country, and how racism and race played into who they were, and the Articles of Confederacy, as well as the Constitution, as well as the 3/5 clause, as well as redistricting. So the issue of race and racism, unfortunately, is just part of the history of this country, and it still continues to exist with us. And we've got to confront it, not be afraid of it, have a conversation about it, and try to parse it down so that it does not impact us going forward. If we are truly focused and committed to addressing racial inequality, gender disparity, wage disparity, all of those issues and more, in addition to the issues that so many people talk about, the criminal justice system, feminization of poverty, and the list goes on and on and on.
All right, hold tight 1 second.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.